My name is James Cabe from Houston, Texas. I am the consulting systems engineer for the Fabric Ready program for Fortinet. What we're here to talk about today is Tufin, of course, and Fortinet, and really automation. And this has probably been, I've been walking around the aisles and the halls here real quick, and the one thing I can say is that is pretty much the theme of this particular RSA is automation of different security solutions, and of course all the coming together of various security solutions. So if there was one single very unexciting theme, it would be automation and integration, right? Would everybody else agree with that? Yeah, me too. So why do we care, right? One very special reason: the bad guys are already doing it, right? And it's an arms race. The web has become Amazon, and Amazon has become the web to some degree, right? So a lot of this stuff, a lot of applications people use, is in your backyard essentially, right? So, so if you think you know where the bad stuff is, and it's only in China and Brazil and places like that, that's categorically, totally, utterly incorrect. So, any questions about that one?
Where is Google App Engine?
Where is Google? Oh, it's that's a great question. At the Hacker Conference, we didn't even see much Google at all. Now, did people probably use it? Yes, it was probably tunneled. So what you're seeing right here is mostly just generic web traffic, right? So this is where essentially they ended up most. So that's a really good question, because we actually have another one that's part of that particular Black Hat CTAP on our website that shows you what types of traffic we're going through, right? So all this is relatively scary and sort of fear, uncertainty, and doubtish, right? Just giving you a little bit of learning, kind of taking away the mist, the fog of war, if you will, about what hacking and generally that sort of stuff is nowadays, right? But what are we doing to protect you people to protect the clients and everybody else in the world from the bad guys who are automated? They've got an economy behind them, and they can hide really well, right? So that's where the value proposition comes in for both Tufin and Fortinet, right? And that's because Fortinet already has some of this automation platform, if you will, or we call it the fabric, because that makes more sense whenever you're tying all these things together for automation, because the integration actually has to come first before automation. After the integration happens, then you can start automating it with very, very intelligent and important stuff. So what does that integration look like? Well, for us, we have no less than 6 different APIs to integrate with all the different types of appliances and security protection that Fortinet has. They all can talk to each other now over a telemetry protocol. So if I plug in a FortiGate and I have a Forti client and I have a FortiMail on the same network, they know about each other automatically. All you do is have to plug them in, and all of a sudden they find each other. It's a cooperative security fabric for all those things. Now, how do you take advantage of that? All that is integration. That is not automation. Those are 2 separate things. Just like easy and simple are 2 different things. So, to that point, how do we do this? Well, and why do we do this, right? We need to gain visibility and control of those hybrid networks we were talking about. They may have a cooperative security fabric where all the details and hacks and everything and all this information goes between each other, and they're very, very aware of it. But how do I take advantage of that, learn about what's going on with the network, and then take an action automatically? Because that's what automation is. The second thing to do it is to reduce attack surface. How do I do that? Well, if their tools are automated, right, can I run around all the time turning knobs, pushing buttons, and pulling levers to stop the attack? Is that a good idea? So if they're automated, I'll need to be the same way, right? So all their generic attacks, if you automate, sometimes their learning engine isn't that intelligent. So what I'm saying here is that the learning engines we have, Tufin has, as part of, the Fortinet provides the mitigation platform, their learning pieces, as well as the automation pieces, is what helps provide that intelligence to the network itself to actually help you automate and make good decisions. The last is to implement changes securely, checking on itself. Why should I do this? Well, I need a set of business rules that tell you, even though that web server gets attacked or that web server may have a bad file on it, I'm not going to shut down the network and stop your access to that particular web server. That would be bad, right? Now, can I stop file uploads and downloads from certain websites that actually contain that malware? Absolutely. So then I can stop the command and control server, that web server, and still keep that web server up. Does that make sense to everybody? That's correct. Now, let me bring in Joe for a little bit. Joe, whenever it comes to this sort of implementation and automation, how simple is it to do something like this? Do you guys have some sort of discovery protocol or something that makes this thing easy?
Yeah, actually, we do. So at Tufin, we garner the whole topology of your network, whether you're using Fortinet or other vendors. And the automation is very important in that regard because it's about speed and not only security, but accuracy as well. And in the context of threat intelligence, the time to exposure is very important. You want to limit that and de-risk that situation as quickly as possible. Additionally, you have the business aspect, the classic time is money. So the longer it takes changes, the more money it's going to cost you. And lastly, as I mentioned, it's about accuracy. Automation can repeat mistakes, but it can also do things very accurately in a controlled fashion.
Thanks, sir. The Tufin Orchestration Suite actually is a platform in itself, and it contains a bunch of different parts to make up that platform that is based on kind of an appification of the platform itself. So is it easy to use? Absolutely. So appification is actually what transformed the mobile experience, right? Before that, I had to go to Windows CE and I had to go to the web to download all my programs, and it was just like a computer. What are the integration highlights whenever it comes to it? Change tracking, right? Policy optimization. Now that's a really cool one. How can something that manages what I do that's only a machine tell me what I'm doing is not optimal or not the best thing to be doing? The point is, sometimes the machine's right in this particular case. So this is what gets back to why are we trying to automate? The first question I asked, right? Which is, why automate? Well, in this particular case, I get to reduce the number of mistakes I make, and I get something that may be a mentor or a policy advisor for me, and thus make my operations far more streamlined. Now, who doesn't like that? You almost raised your hand. You're in timeout. So, point is, we have different case studies that we actually have as part of this. We have large retailers, global manufacturers. Typically, the people who choose a lot of these automation and integration suites are the ones that have lots and lots of problems. So they have to go out and invest very, very, very quickly in these sorts of things. The next group of people that will be doing this is obviously mid-enterprise, and it floats down. Why does this need to happen? It gets back to exactly that economy of scale that was already going on, right? Even the small guys have to start automating. So even if you are 5 guys in a coffee pot at your particular shipping company or your logistics company, you need some of this automation, because especially with the smaller companies, should you be paying all your time about cybersecurity even though you've got to ship a package? That's right. If you have to drive a truck somewhere, are you going to want to go and play with the rules on the firewall? Probably not, right? So does this make sense not just to big guys like this that have a lot of money? No. As a matter of fact, it makes more sense to the smaller business and SOHOs. So, regulatory compliance, this has been the big one, right? So, typically, I roll into a lot of smaller retail companies, especially regional ones, and a lot of them seem to be based out of Dallas. So, but the point is, a lot of them seem to be based there, so I have a lot of dealings with retail. Well, they have something called PCI compliance, right? Energy companies have NERC compliance, NERC SIP. And then last but not least, there's also all this banking compliance that actually has to come in. So all the credit card fraud that goes on, credit card fraud transactions with the networks that actually transact your credit cards, all these things are stuff that actually has this low minimum bar to meet for compliancy. How do you meet those audit reports? Well, the one way to do it is actually go pick through the guides that are about that thick. Sir, since you knew about NERC, how big is the manual for NERC SIP?
Too big.
There you go. I think it's something like 1,000 pages. Who has time to do that? Wouldn't it be nice to have a tool that can actually already make these decisions for you and tell you how to do it? Yeah, that's sort of the point. So, how ultimately do we defend against this? So we knew we now have to automate. We know that there's a gigantic set of economies that are actually after us. What do we do to provide the security that helps with this automation and integration, and hopefully helps the robots help us, right? User identification, who it is, right? So the old way of doing firewalls and security and those sorts of things was, I have this IP address or I have this file, and I need to make sure that those don't go the same place, right? That's dead now. No more about IP addresses. Who cares about an IP address? Nobody does. That's why we have DNS, right? Domain name service. That's the reason why I can type in google.com and not have to figure out the IP address of it, right? So we don't really care about IPs anymore. We care about users. We care about what they're on. And you can actually combine these two to create to create its own policy, right? Because sometimes I care about what laptop are you on. Are you on the corporate laptop who has a corporate image? Well, then I'm gonna give you greater access to my infrastructure. But if it's your iPad with your apps from a secondary app store that's probably a little shady, am I gonna want that iPad going to the same places? Probably not. So, last but not least, physical topology. What do you physically look like? Because that's actually a huge attack surface. If I am NERC SIP compliant, right? I've got these switches out there and these gigantic transformers that can kill people. And I've got these substations where if water leaks into it, bad things might happen. Or if I've got, somebody leaves the door open, during a rainstorm, that might be a bad thing. So I've got all these sensor networks and things like that have to be there. So physical topology matters just as much. And this goes back to logging and automation especially, right? And last but not least, network application topology. So not just who I am, what I'm on, but what applications I'm doing for behavioral analysis. Any questions about that? So once I've got all that information, I can actually make some very intelligent policy decisions that I can then automate on. So that helps us collapse the tunnels, right? So because when it goes back to application, I'm not going to want somebody running a Tor exit node on their PC at my site, right? That kind of is like dumping garbage directly into your office. That would be a bad thing. So being able to do that with visibility using deep packet inspection, I have this automation and adaptation for the network that Tufin puts into my network. I have DNS inspection, which is that whole I don't care about IP addresses anymore. And I have code emulation sandboxing. This is basically emulating what humans do every day. That's the point of that whole things. Data loss prevention, who's taking what off my network and why? Because sometimes it's an expatriation of data by bad guys that you've never stepped foot into your office. And then network behavioral modding, threat scoring. Basically, I've got a laptop that keeps acting up over here. It may not have a virus on it, no matter how many virus scanners I have on it, but it keeps doing bad things on my network. It's probably time to take that thing off the network and do a real, true forensics inspection on it, right? Any questions about any of this? Great. Well, my name's James Cabe. This is Joe Schreiber, works for Tufin. That was my presentation for today.